Well, welcome back to another episode of Lorcana Chats. I'm your host, Chris, aka Questing for Lore. And in this episode, I'm joined by Daniel, one half of the Lorcana Fanatics, to take a look at the world's watch party community event he helped organize, Enchanted Moments. Come listen in as we talk about that event, some of his ideas for what makes a good Lorcana event, and some of his suggestions for the future, both on the community and organized play sides. Sound like fun? Let's get to it. Well, hey, Daniel, how's it going? It's been a little while.
It has. It's going great.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Okay, so real quick before we get started, go ahead and tell folks kind of who you are, what you do, all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. My name is Daniel, and most people on social media know me as Daniel and Lily. I have an 8-year-old daughter, one of two daughters, who started playing Lorcana really in the first chapter, so at the very beginning. And so we've been on this journey for, gosh, almost 2 years now. And most of our social media content is about sharing our story as a story as a dad and daughter duo, and just really helping the community grow as we teach other families to learn to play Lorcana.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's great that we have a game that we can do that, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like something we have to worry about our kids playing, little kids or anything. It's I've heard stories of people that basically as soon as their kids are able to like read the cards, they've got them, at the table playing. So, you know, it's really cool. I tried to get my kids into it, but they're older and, they don't think card games are cool. So, oh well, their loss, right?
Yeah, and again, it's not so much their loss, right? I mean, every kid is going to have their own hobbies, and again, I think as parents, this is part of the conundrum, right? On the one hand, I'm certainly not going to force my kids to do anything. Part of the what's made Lorcana fun is a combination of obviously it's getting to do something together, right? I think that's probably early on was the more special part. It just helped that Lily also was pretty advanced in reading, so she could read the cards at a pretty young age.
Hmm.
And I think we're at this really interesting moment. Maybe that's something we talk about later in another episode, just around just when your kid starts off in a hobby and really loves it, but then hits a point where maybe it's not like their favorite thing. It's not their thing anymore.
Yep.
That's kind of hard, right? So we'll talk about that some other time. But for the time
Yeah.
being, we
Yeah.
love Lorcana. It's been a big part of our journey, and that's why we're here.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for being on again. I appreciate it. I think, let's see, I had you on by yourself once before, on with Vox Lorcana. So I guess this is your third time, which is kind of
It
crazy.
is. Yeah,
Really kind
you
of
had me and
tells.
Lily on almost a year ago, actually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot Lily was in that episode too for what, like
Yeah,
15 minutes there at the beginning?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to, all the stuff that you do for the community. You have your own content, you do the group content in Vox Lorcana, and now the main thing that we're here to talk about today is the Worlds Party that you helped put on, that you helped organize, and from what I can tell, really kind of kicked it off. Kind of tell me a little bit about how it all got started, what the idea was behind it, what the first kind of steps were.
sure. Yeah, gosh, if we can all think back to it's January, February, March, and we're all kind of waiting for news on Worlds, and somewhere between that period of March to April, there were a lot of content creators who started talking about, it'd be great to do something in North America, and bring everyone together. And so that sort of like in the lull of information and of events, right? There was no details yet about season two. It just seemed like there was enough interest and almost perhaps pining for an event. And the event sort of less event organizer, but more just community manager in me felt like, well, we're here in Texas, which is the middle. Let's try to bring something together. And so that was actually the first start was trying to gather content creators together to do an event. And then I think 2 weeks after I kind of reached out to some folks, news on Worlds being closed was announced. And so that
Hmm.
was kind of this disappointing kind of moment. And then again, if you can think back, some of the earliest communications indicated that a whole new world promo card was going to be made available at local game stores. And so there
Right.
was sort of this theory of, if I host something, then I can guarantee that our local game store will get some cards. Maybe they'll get more allocation of this, exciting promo that we were all looking forward to. And so those were some of the early impetuses for what eventually became Enchanted Moments, right? This really big event that we had. But the early inception, kind of the OG part of it, was really trying to do something for the content creator community, and then it kind of ballooned into this thing of, want to do something for everyone. And I really have to give credit to the Limiteers again. Liam and Aaron are here in Austin, and it's great to be able to bounce ideas off of them. They are both so incredibly supportive. If you ever have an idea and you're worried, or you're feeling a little bit anxious of whether or not your idea is worth doing, just send them a DM, to whether on X, Instagram, or Discord. I think the two of them are like the ultimate hype champions. And so when you have them in
Yep.
your corner, you can't help but feel inspired to actually pull something daunting off, right? I have not planned a full scale event in quite, probably a decade. Nowadays at work, I've got teams that help kind of do that kind of stuff. And so I understand kind of what goes into that, but just, without, a strong army of volunteers, it can be very challenging to put on a large scale event. And at some point in time, what ballooned from this, let's get together as content creators and hang out in Austin or somewhere, became this, we're going to plan the largest event possible in North America, or even in the world, as a substitute, right, as an alternative to the fact that we were not all going to be able to be at Worlds in Disney World. And so that's kind of the impetus. Happy to share more, but again, I think the general idea of where we landed was, we were able to find a black box theater that had this huge screen. And I'm really proud, because I remember feelings of going to DLCs, especially the later ones, and having this screen, having chairs, and people being able to watch the top 8 cut, the final streams, watching Wonderland win in Seattle, and everyone was sitting there. Those were just some really special moments, and I wanted to recreate that. And again, I think that the other impetus for me was the fact that Lily and I missed the opportunity to go to North American Championships, because all the fires, it just didn't quite feel safe for us. And so we canceled that
Oh
trip,
yeah.
and we're like, okay, we're going to go to Worlds. And so again, I think all in all, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into putting on this event, again, a huge kudos to any event organizer. If you ever want to plan an event, happy to chat. It is not easy. It takes a lot of, capital, right? It takes some sponsorships to pull off an event of this scale and size. But I'm really proud that both for the people who, and then there were content creators who came into Austin, who flew in from other states. My favorite moment was hearing someone say, "This is not this was everything I hoped it could be." Right? This was like as good as what I hope my World's experience would have been.
Oh,
And we had side events, we had an artist, right? We try to recreate as much of that vibe as possible, and I'm really glad that we were able to do that.
nice. Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I was looking through all the different stuff that y'all had going on, besides Brian Weiss, and you had let's see. Hang on. You actually had the tournament with the cap. Let's see. Stream of the World's Champions. Sorry, I'm looking through my notes here because I took I
Yeah,
took a
no, no,
bunch of
no
notes
worries.
as
Yeah,
usual,
on,
but
yeah, we tried to really create an event for the whole weekend, especially for
mhm.
folks who are coming from out of town. And so I think in the end we had probably 10 or so folks from out of town. And so Saturday was sort of Game Castle, one of our local game stores, hosted a box tournament, case tournament. That was great. It was funny again, is actually we had more out of towners compete in that than we had locals, because I think all the
Really.
locals were like, "Oh, we're just going to go home and watch." Well, we also had our PPG qualifier the weekend before, and
Oh
so
yeah, that's
that was a
right.
lot of Lorcana.
Yep.
But then day two was our main event, right? Day two, and again, it was trying to figure out exactly how do you coordinate and plan an event when you don't even know when the stream is going to start.
Hmm.
And I'm very grateful that not only did we have an incredible partner in the Long Center, right, this performing arts center that had a black box theater, some of the organizers that I got paired up with to work with actually, they play in various other TCGs. And so again, that was this cool, fun element of the fact that they understood what we were trying to do, and that they understood kind of the flexibility that we needed. Like, okay, top, the finals are untimed. And they're like, okay, that makes sense. We can go as far as you need to, and before 9 p.m. I'm like, I'm pretty sure we'll be done before 9. And then of course, things got announced. We started stream at 8 o'clock in the morning in Central Time, and then you had you had Ed was playing so fast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The caster break didn't happen anyway. So, but yeah, we had a full set of events. I think the most interesting things that we had were obviously a seating area where people could watch on the big screen. We had Brian Weiss on the side doing card signings and amazing caricatures. He does these really great character designs on the cards. So they're beautiful.
Nice.
We had, our title sponsor, Wilder Gaming. They had a table set up with products. You could buy packs. They also just announced their Lorcana team, and so they had two of their top players doing pack rush. So you could buy pack rush, and then if you won, you got to pick out a promo card. And quite a few enchanteds were open, so that was kind of a fun little side event that was
Nice.
happening. And then the Lorcana Heat, right? Both Keith and Sam came in,
Mm-hmm.
and they hosted a sort of, they call it the Hard Lore tournament. Essentially, they had this nice playmat bounty, and it was sort of like King of the Hill, right? Whoever won got to kind of own the mat, and then it just kept going until the very end of the event. And so I think the person who held onto the mat had it for like 7 or 8 rounds.
Oh
So
wow.
again, it was nice to have that. And then, I think the last thing we had, the two last things, kind of like the nice touch, right, adding to the magical piece of it, was we had some of those foil playmats from Matified. So these are,
Mm-hmm.
official Disney Lorcana playmats, including a Rockstar Stitch, the second place one. And, those were foiled, right, with a kind of beautiful foiling that Matified does. We had ink inspired mocktails, and then we
Nice.
have a little pin trading station. So that kind of rounds out the full
Yeah.
experience of the event.
Okay. Awesome. So, what were the ink-inspired mocktails? Did they have fun names, or were they just, like Sapphire Sipper, or
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, I can't recall them right now. Aaron from the Limiteers had actually found, I guess at either Gen Con or some other event in year one, there was an event where there were ink inspired mocktails. And
Okay.
so we took some of those names and recipes, handed it over to our caterer, and they were like, they got creative. My favorite one they have, and if I can find it, I'll share a video with you later. Was, I think you could call this one like Sapphire Steel, but essentially it was like a blueberry mix. And when you like sort of like when the bartender kind of made this drink, there was a little bit of glitter, and then when you like kind of mixed everything together, the colors kind of changed, right? And so some people say it was more blurple than it was Sapphire Steel, but again, I guess you see whatever ink colors that you want in some of these. So we
Yeah.
had like 4 different colors. We had like almost like a ruby amber cocktail, and again, so it was fun. I think people enjoyed this.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's a kind of a fun, kind of unique idea. Like you hear about, all these, the competitions and stuff. Sometimes I'm sure they have little things around, but to really bring the focus back to, hey, we want people to hang out here. We want everybody to have fun. Here, let's provide some of this stuff. And y'all provided like light snacks and stuff, right? Too.
Oh yeah, we had full catering. We
Oh,
had
okay.
we had lunch and dinner. Right, again, I mean, you kind of have
Cool.
to plan accordingly for the full day. So
Right. Right.
it's full service. It was ticketed event, and we wanted to make sure everyone had a premium experience. The goodie bags were fantastic too, right? So that's
Nice.
again, anytime you can pixie dust in some way in a Disney event, you're on the right track.
So was there glitter everywhere when you guys wrapped up for the evening?
I mean, there is pixie dust everywhere. I mean, by pixie dust, I
Pixie
mean
dust.
Lorcana booster pack wrappers, right? Were
Oh,
everywhere.
okay, okay. Yep, I could definitely see that. Yep.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. And so the overall vibe of the thing went well. I mean, yeah, you said you got some great feedback right earlier, but did it seem like it went over pretty well?
Yeah, again, I think if you're the person organizing an event, you're not. It's hard to enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
And I think there were 3 moments that I really kind of cherish. One was, I think when we had just finished setting up, like we started a little bit later, obviously not knowing when the stream was going to start. So I think everything was set up right as Mo and Zach Bivens were playing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
was a real, I think, a heartbreaker of a day two round. And so,
Yeah.
being able to really watch that as people were slowly coming in, that was really fun. Getting to sit with Lily, we're big fans of Zach. And so just cheering him on. And obviously, Mo is also another dad, right? So I think that the dad vibes were just there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I think there was a second moment, which, my partner, I don't talk a lot about her on social media. I don't talk too much about my youngest either on social media, but um, what I hadn't realized, but there was this moment where I'm standing next to my wife and I'm like, oh, this is what a DLC is like. This is like a micro version of a DLC. Like,
Yes.
you can see how happy and into the game people are. And it was actually her first time, like, really getting all of that. And so
Yeah.
that was really special for me. I don't think I planned for that moment. But, by virtue of us hosting, it became that. And so, again, I think those are really important moments. I think if you and your partner, share a hobby, it's great. If you don't, like, being able to bring them into the hobby, or at least help them see a part of why this is so important to, to me and Lily, I think was really important. So I think that was a really fun moment. And then the last one was Scott, our Cipher, who's on
Mm-hmm.
Vox Lorcana with me. Him and I have never met in person before. And
Okay.
so, like, I had been in a DLC with Rebecca. He had been in a DLC with Rebecca. And we just kept missing each other. And North America Championships was supposed to be the first time, right, for us, hosting our podcast, to be together. And so, that was a bummer. But then, again, when I hosted this, he was like, I'm going to be there. And so that was incredibly exciting to meet him and his partner, and just spend the weekend with them. And I'm really glad I got to do that. We definitely, spent, I think, a lot more time together, had some dinners, and then just really got to enjoy that moment of sitting in a chair, watching the finals, watching DKP take it all.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my top three moments for me. And
Nice.
so, again, I mean, in terms of feedback, I think everyone had a great time. I haven't heard, anyone, I mean, I think the hardest thing that people said was, let's do this again, right? Let's do this
Yeah.
more. And
Yeah.
again, I think that was coming off of, again, limited information that we have had. And then, kind of since then, it's transitioned into, Wilder Gaming, I think, has been, talking to Ravensburger about potentially hosting a CCQ, a qualifier. And so,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think there's a lot of interest in having an event hosted. I think one of my other goals was, I'm on the board of trustees for the Long Center, and one of our missions is just to be able to be a space for the community, for artists. And so having an artist in an artist space, right, was really important to me. Helping the community, a community that normally probably wouldn't have gone and seen a show at the Long Center. It was important for me to bring them to the campus. And then we also, we raffled off some tickets we have a Moana live in concert in November. And so, again, I think just everything kind of really came together in a really fun way. So,
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's really great when it happens that way. I
yeah,
did some conference organizing for a couple of years, and so I understand some of the moving pieces and everything that goes on behind the scenes, and I'm totally there with you. You get so lost in coordination and making sure everything's checked off the list and everything that it's hard to enjoy it. But it's great when you have moments like what you're talking about, where you just kind of like you're
exactly.
able to step back and actually look at what you've made, and look at the people that are enjoying it. That's the best part, right? Everybody
Yes,
is
absolutely.
just they're playing the game they love, they're hanging out, they're talking, they're watching, watching the stream. I wish I would have been able to make it. It just didn't work out,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But maybe the next one.
Yeah. Again, everyone's like, even the Lawson was like, I hope you guys host this next year. I'm like, yeah, but I want to be at Worlds next year.
Right,
Right. So it's like,
right.
it's a catch 22. It's a catch 22. But
Yep.
no, I mean, again, I think bringing the community together always is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Isn't that true? I mean, again, I can't believe that, the last time I was at an official gathering was Seattle, which was October, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and not currently planning to to make it up for the DLC this fall. And so, if I'm not making it to Milwaukee, like at the earliest, right, January, right, for the next one. And so,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think in between, I think we try to fill the space however we can. But I think that's one of the hardest things. But again, if you have a desire to host something, create something, and bring the community together, I think it's always worth it.
Yep. Totally agree. Yep. So I'm curious now that you've kind of organized a community event, what kind of things and what kind of pieces of it, I guess, do you think would be great to see at like more official events? I know with the DLCs that are coming up,
Yeah.
we haven't gotten a ton of information if they'll look the same as as they have in the past or what. But I'm curious, like I said, as an organizer, what do you think they should include in these more official events?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I'm going to start with mocktails, right? Like
There you
there's
go.
something festive and fun. I mean, how can you can't go to any Disney property and not, enjoy something, inspired by the amazing, food and beverage team.
Hmm.
I mean, why don't we have Dole Whips right at DLCs? I'm just gonna put that out
Exactly.
there.
I mean, I'm on board with
Hey,
that.
look, you can have a Dole Whip with a little bit of an ink color right
There you
streaked
go.
through it. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
anyways, I think from a side event standpoint, I'll start there. I mean, I think overall
Hmm.
experience, something that again I personally did not get to experience in the North American Championships, but certainly as the DLCs evolved and we kind of saw this concept of like a turbo zone, right? This idea of here are some VIP experiences, things that you can do, things you can sign up for. Those are nice. And I remember talking to some of the staff at Seattle, and we were already kind of brainstorming various ideas again around my primary focus, which is if you have a family that's coming, how do you create an experience that is there for them? And again, I think there's a part of this which is not certainly in the current season format for DLCs, but my hope would be that again the heavier social component of a Disney Lorcana challenge starts to perhaps look more like, again, I've never been, but I've seen, and I've read a lot of commentary on Pokemon and Pokemon Worlds. I mean,
Hmm.
Pokemon Worlds is a social event, right? Yes, there's multiple competitive elements, but that's almost not the main reason people are there, right? They're there for this full on experience. It almost feels like a con, like a
Yeah.
conference. And I think those are some interesting pieces where again, you've got this Disney community that goes to D23, goes to all these other events. What would it look like if you kind of found a way to weave some of these elements together? Where yes, you're going to compete, but then if you're not someone who's a heavy competitor, you're not there to do that. You've got all these other pieces right that are there for you as well, right? Or if you have a partner or a friend that's going with you that wants to travel with you but doesn't play Lorcana yet, how do you create a on ramp experience for them? And I think again, Gen Con's probably like the closest, right? Some of these
Hmm.
conferences that obviously Lorcana is co-sponsoring Gen Con this year, or Ravensburger is co-sponsoring Gen Con. I think those are nice. I look forward to maybe one day getting to go to those to better experience and understand. But I think by and large, side events that really help folks understand and just get to connect and play Lorcana. Um, I'll even throw this out there. One of the fun events we did in our local community was we tried to organize the largest Illuminator's Quest Deep Trouble, right? So it's like the Battling Ursula event. I think we had 5 games running concurrently with 4 players each.
Oh wow.
So 20 players playing that game at the same time. I don't know if that's the largest. I'll claim it's the largest one hosted in the world.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh,
Until you're proven
yeah,
otherwise. Yeah.
exactly. But having Palace Heist running, I did appreciate having Villainous right as a side event. I think there was a few
Hmm.
DLCs. I think Chicago, we didn't. Chicago, I think we didn't have that, and then I think in Seattle we did. So yeah, again, those are just some of those experiences that were fun. Experiments that Ravensburger was testing out, and I do look forward to them continuing to mature and grow the experience.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much possibility. There's so many things besides just let's go and play, and let's have side events. That's great, right? And there's some social aspect there, but actually having things that are specifically designed to be social, that are not just like, oh, this happens to be a social kind of thing.
Yep.
I think one of the DLCs, I think they did like Friday. Friday sessions, so that they were a
Yep.
little bit more on the social side because they weren't like official, the main event or anything like that. But um,
Yep.
I really do hope that they do stuff like that this time. But they've already said, at least for the first one, there's no events on Friday, which is kind of disappointing. Um, but we don't know what the rest of the stuff is. It's just going to be
Yeah.
side events and main event, or if there's going to be other things going on at the same time, or it'll be interesting. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. I agree. Look, I mean, we know that there's pivots, staff, restructuring changes that have been made, from a corporate perspective. I mean, um, this is not surprising, right? I think from a sort of the impact of that, and the stabilization of that's going to be challenging. I think the community at large, again, the community should always speak up. I will say that,
yep,
right? Because the customer voice is what drives the design and decision making for the game, or at least it should. And I think we know that the community does speak up and should never be afraid to speak up. And so, again, I think there's a lot of, I'll say, I mean, there's a lot of frustrations of expectations not being met on a number of areas. And again, I think for us, we're still, this is our first TCG. And so it's less that our expectations are different. I think our expectations are actually quite high
mm-hmm.
because, I'm a parent, and it's not just about my experience. It's about the experience that I have to think almost like doubly hard, right, and intentionally about what is an experience going to be like for my daughter. And I want to ensure that before I put in a lot of investment of time, certainly money,
Mm-hmm.
into traveling to Milwaukee, for example, that there's an experience that's going to be there on the other side, that merits all of those things, right?
Yep.
And so I think, again, this game is still young, but I think we have a very passionate, family of Illumineers
Yep.
who are really hungry to soak up every moment they possibly can. And so I think to that end and to that audience, there is certainly clearly, right, there is desire for more. And again, I'm happy to see, again, from a design standpoint, from an organized play standpoint, right, the CCQs, right, these qualifiers, I think that
Mm-hmm.
certainly has given some more validity, right, to the third party community. Again, as a new TCG player, I'm learning, like, this is kind of what happens in other TCGs too, right? Like,
Yeah.
third party event support is really critical to the health of the competitive scene, and to a certain degree, right, health of the social scene, right? Anything that's not tabletop, right? Kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
kitchen counter, right? So
Yep. So this popped into my head. It's not one of the questions I gave you, but um, so do you think that some of this is that the right expectations aren't being set by Ravensburger for the community? Like, are they? I don't know if I'm asking this the right way. um, are
actually,
they not? Are they
let
not
me. I think.
managing our expectations right? I guess.
Um, I think when you are, and it's funny, right? Our name, Lorcana Fanatics. I mean, when you are living, breathing, sleeping Lorcana, you think everyone else, that is a customer, right, of Ravensburger also is.
Mm-hmm.
And the community at large, again, I mean, to whoever is listening to this, right, watching this, you're likely stumbling on Chris's content because it's amazing, and you should watch all the videos, episodes.
Yeah.
um I mean, it's an incredible chronicling of the human meta, if you will, right? But by and large, right, Chris, I mean, most people that you meet at a DLC will have never heard of your YouTube
Mm-hmm.
channel or your podcast, right?
Yep.
And that's, I mean, it's kind of wild to think about that, right? There are hundreds, let's even put it thousands of Illumineers who only engage through, let's say Reddit, right, or Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
or no social media at all. I mean, that really blows my mind. And so, again, I mean, and that's just, and I'm just solely speaking about those who play, right? And I think there's something about kind of it's not so much that it's myopic. Again, our voices are loud because we are intense, right? Because we really care and we spend a lot of time thinking, playing, reading, right, creating content about Disney Lorcana. But that's not the case for everyone. And
Hmm.
if I'm a perspective I've tried to take is, if I'm Ravensburger, um, who are my audience segments, right? Like, who am I trying to reach and what am I trying to reach them with? The one that's puzzled me the most, because I see little teasers of it, but I don't see it in full force. And maybe it's just a timing thing, maybe it's a marketing budget thing, but the push to convert more Disney fans and collectors, I feel like it's more teases and drops, right? Like we
Hmm.
see, promo cards now available, right? Lily and I, we were just in Europe, went to the Disney store in London, and we bought a pack and we got an Elsa promo card, right? The one that has like the signature blank spot. And so
Right.
again, it's nice to see those elements, but there's a part of me that's like, that is still so niche, right?
Hmm.
Like, you would have had no idea that that card existed unless you went up to the second floor, right, of the Disney store, and then you asked for it,
Yeah.
right? The cashier on the first floor had no idea what this even was.
Yep.
And so, is that a training and kind of development thing? I don't know. But my point is, like, okay, we know that there's a collector audience, and that's a pretty big part of many TCGs, right? You could almost say, like, in the customer mix, collectors are an important part of, right? Collectors, also drive value, secondary market, all that stuff. And so they're an important part of the community. Obviously, players are a piece of the community. Player collectors are a big part of the community. They're probably the core. Um, and again, like, I think part of what I'm going to be very curious on is, how does, and we'll never know, right? They're likely never going to say officially or publicly. But I think those of us who are really embedded in the community probably make some assumptions that the player community is the larger part of the segment of the pie. But in reality, I think it probably isn't, right? Because we're not seeing actions, afforded accordingly. Because again, I think that that's the part that I think is most interesting. I mean, even just take set rotations, right? That's right around the corner. With what we're learning now, I mean, the feeling I'm getting is like, this is for people who are coming in. We're onboarding a new set of people into this game. It's a way for them to catch up and collect some of the most iconic, pun intended, right, cards. But if you're a player, and slash collector, you're like, I've already completed this set, right? There's 33 new cards coming out. So again, I think these are feelings that we're all feeling because we are, one type of customer. And again, I mean, if you're watching this, my question and reflection point for you is just, again, setting healthy expectations for yourself, right, is the most important thing, right? We want you to have a mentally healthy state about your relationship with this game, whether it's a hobby, it's more than a hobby, it's a competitive hobby, or just something social for you. I hope that's helpful to hear at least my perspective.
Yeah, no, that's great. And honestly, that's something that is really, really easy to forget. We get, like you said, there's some of us that are like, eat, sleep, breathe Lorcana, and and some of the professional folks that, they're on these teams and they compete in these DLCs and they make these high level ranks. They're sitting and they're playing it all the time. It's like hundreds of games in the span of like a week or something. And it really is. It's easy to get those blinders and not think about all these other things. I had, God, it's been forever now, but I had Digital Ink on one time, and he is definitely on the collector side. And I was thinking when I was looking around for people to talk to, I was like, I want a different perspective. I want somebody that's not going to be in there and they're not worried about the meta. They're not worried about, which cards they should, have in their in their collection because they might blow up one day or stuff like that. It's like, no, he's focused on the collection piece, right? He even, I think he actually, just for like a challenge, sold off a whole bunch of his collection and tried to see how fast he could regain it all. And that, I mean, that was what was fun for him. You know, it was like,
Yeah,
okay, I mean, cool. You know, we all have our different things, and yeah, I totally agree. It's so easy to forget that those other folks are out there, and they're, you know, they have completely different goals. You know, there could be, you know, people that got the Iago promo in their D23 thing,
yep,
and they're like, what is this? I don't know what this is. You know, and they might keep it, but probably not look
yeah,
into it anymore. You know, and that might be the only connection they have to the game. But, um, you know, and honestly, because of the way that the game is, and there's so many different ways that you can engage with it, it's okay, right? You don't have to be a hardcore Lorcana
absolutely,
player to be part of the Lorcana community. You know, there's just so
absolutely.
many aspects that you can, you know, fit it into your life in different ways, I guess. But yeah, totally agree. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a great thought, a great statement. That's perfect. Um, so I'm curious. So if you were building the perfect Lorcana event, you know, and you had all the money at your disposal, all the people at your disposal, what would you make?
That's such a great question. First, I would hire Erin from the Limiteers because she
Mm-hmm.
is incredible. You know, I'm you know her, and there's a whole cadre of folks out in the West Coast, right, who've put on some social events as well. I would, right, you got to assemble the A team first, right? Bring the right resources together. What would the event look like? I mean, again, I'm going to go back to two things. One that Aaron once said to me as we were planning the Enchanted Moments event, because there was this moment where I think I mean I think I can remember this moment where I'm sitting in the parking lot of Game Castle and I'm on the phone with Aaron. And I don't think she'll mind me sharing this. You know, I was like, if you know, if we don't get the sponsorships that we need in this week, I really don't feel comfortable moving forward on this event, right? Because of the cost, like the cost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't fair to push and shoulder that either for myself. You know, my partner and I had talked about kind of like where our own level of comfort and range of our investments would be beyond the time energy put into this. Um, and I was just feeling a little bit down because it was like, you know, as I reached out for feedback, right? Feedback is so important to me. It's important in my day job. I felt important in this. Like you're creating something for the community. It better be what the community wants, right?
Yep.
And for the most part, it was going to be the local community. And you know, I had some folks who were like, you know, why is your ticket price so high, Daniel? Right? And I was like, well, I kind of, you know, I'm balancing this ticket price against how much sponsorship we think we can raise, right? And you know, pricing is tough. Like I don't want to put a
Yeah.
low price and then have to raise it later. And so then we created early bird pricing, right? And that kind of solved that. But you know, Erin said something. She said, you know, yeah, like I think most people are going to default to watching Worlds on their couch, right? And they might invite a few friends over because you know, that's sort of the, so if we were to use like the Super Bowl as the analogy, right? I mean, you're going to watch the Super Bowl in the comfort of your home with all your own snacks and everything, and with your closest friends, right? And so I think that tends to be the experience most people go after,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because most of us have really nice TVs. Like you're not going to go to a bar and have that experience, right? Unless you have a really large group of friends or, you know, folks from your fantasy football team that you want to gather together beyond just within the living room confines. And so I think the thing that Aaron said to me was like, we are trying to create an experience. And in that moment, I was like, you're right. We're not just creating a watch party,
Yeah.
because if we're just a watch party, yeah, like you should just do that at home with your friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, with your local group that you play with, that you travel with to Lorcana events. That's good enough, right? In fact, that's actually what we did for nationals, right? For the, you know, for North America championships, we hosted something at our house. We had people come over, and it was a smaller group, but you have to create something that has no other alternative. And so again, that's what birth Enchanted Moments was. We created something that was, I would say, almost like halfway to a full DLC, at least the side event experience, and then being there to watch, right, the event unfold in competition, and the highest level of competition happen. So
Mm-hmm.
I think an event has to be something that you can't get anywhere else, right? I think the perfect event has to be something that only Ravensburger and Disney can pull off, right? It's something that SSG, right, Charlie's, for all the amazing work that they are doing, the resources they have, and how they surprise and delight by adding new things, right? Juniors, Rising Star Tournament here, scholarships for kids, all these things. These are fun ideas. But, I think, again, what we know to be true about Disney is always pushing the envelope, always design thinking kind of ahead of the curve. And that's the pixie dust, right? And so to me, the perfect event, I don't know how to describe it exactly in current moment or current words, but it has to be something, an experience that is so magical that even though you thought you knew what you were getting and you were willing to pay, right,
Mm.
for that experience, for that gathering, whatever it might be, when you get there, you are just blown away, right? Because it's so much more than what you could have imagined or hoped for. I'll give a very small example of just like what the vibes or like the feeling of that might be like. I think about, because we were fortunate enough to go to a DLC. Between Chicago and Seattle were very, very different experiences. Um, but even between those two, one of my greatest hopes for Seattle was that we would have the illuminary pillars, right? The great illuminary
Yeah, yeah,
pillars, which were at all the events in Europe. And they even had them in China and I think in Japan. I think at least in China for some of their social media or for some of their marketing activations, like at China Joy. I really thought and hoped that Seattle, right, being sort of the North America headquarters of Ravensburger, that we would see those pillars there. Of course, we know that they made it to the North America Championships, or at least some version of that, and that was really cool, right, for the players to play in that kind of arena feel. Um, but the feeling of that connects you even further in an immersive experience to the story of and the lore, I think was something I really hoped for, and we never saw in North America, right? And so
hmm
I use that just as a very simple example of, I look at the Grand Prix that happened in Shanghai. I mean, it just, again, the in some ways the composition of the different elements in the stages or the areas, like, your prize wall area and everything, those felt pretty similar. The banners for the most part were like the same kind of banners, and so again, I think, but there's something about the way that um, it's a combination of having an incredible event space,
hmm
right? You've been to plenty of conferences, right? I mean,
yeah,
there are some conferences you're like, okay, this is just the ballroom, and there's other
yeah,
conferences where you're like, wow, that's amazing. And I think about how when we all saw North America Championships, it was the music, right, and this like beautiful ambiance of this viewing area, and that was the wow, right? And then of
hmm
course I heard people talk about the Rice Krispie treats, right, that were also pretty incredible. So again, I'm going to bring it back to that. I think that's my close is, and so thanks for just like letting me unpack all this. I think the perfect event has to be something that at the end of the day, um, really has so much incredible thought and partnership, because that's the Disney I know, right?
hmm
When I look at Disney from a business standpoint, some of the things I love about Disney and how they do partnerships is they are so focused on the attention to detail,
yep,
right? If you look at any Disney product, in the way that all the different Disney siloed teams they operate, they're not operating in silos. They really come together, right? I mean, when they're making a movie and then the rides team, right, they're coming together. And so those are some of my favorite moments. And so again, my hope would be that the perfect event is planned in such a way that even the tiniest minute detail is thought of. And so as an attendee, as a competitor, as someone, a participant of this experience, you're just truly blown away.
hmm nice. Yeah, I love that. That's and if there's any company in the world that can make that happen, you would think one that's got Disney behind it should be able to be able to pull that off. But um, yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's having it kind of turning it around and thinking of it as an experience, and a one of a kind of experience. I think that's an important shift. It's not just like you
Yeah.
said, it's not just let's get together and watch things or let's get together and play the game. It's like, no, no, this needs to be a thing, right? Which yeah, that's awesome. So if you had any suggestions to Ravensburger to maybe push them in that kind of direction? Do you have any suggestions that they might be able to take to heart?
Um, not everyone can make it to a DLC.
Hmm.
So if you're not designing an experience just for competitors, now you have to think about what are anchor moments that might be an annual thing or a semi-annual thing, right? Because again, I think your average customer can really only probably travel to one thing. Otherwise, they're diverting those resources from something else. And let's just put it this way: you don't want to divert resources from saying, "Am I going to go to Disneyland, right, or Disney
Yeah.
World, or am I going to go to DLC?" That's not good, like good business value, right? And so, I would hope that the design for a annual celebration, right? A Lorcana Con, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's the way to solve this, right? In terms of creating something that matches the needs and the desires and wants of our competitors, right? And I put myself in that category, right? But again, I can't necessarily afford to go to 3 DLCs.
Yeah.
Um, I might put all my energy and time investments towards, picking one. I would actually say this, right? Like, going to Richmond, Virginia for me, like, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a chance to compete. So there's that. For Lily, it's less that, right? At this age and
Hmm.
kind of where her interests are, it's more about creating a really fun and again, a magical experience for her. And that might not be Richmond, Virginia, right? That might be, let's go to Taipei, Taiwan, and make it a whole spring break trip. And so I think those are some things that are hard to calculate. But if you're going to have something at Disneyland or Disney World, that's naturally going to draw a lot of folks. And then so again, can you create a? I think it has to be more than 2 days. I think you're going to have a 3 day at least experience.
Yeah.
So there's enough days, enough sessions, enough things to do between competition and all the other stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would really be interested to see if that kind of a thing would ever evolve. I mean, it seems like it would be like a natural kind of thing. Because like you were saying, some of the Pokemon events are just, I mean, they're basically just like big social gatherings that people happen to be competing at. It's kind of the opposite of what we're working with at the DLCs. And then you end up with things like, having speakers come in or having panels and then all of a sudden it starts looking kind of more like a Gen Con kind of thing, but it's, still Lorcana focused. I'd love
yep,
to see something
yep.
like that personally, to be able to have that flexibility, to have, sessions and, one-on-one interviews with the folks behind the game and just there's all sorts of possibilities that, you could get in there.
I mean, can you imagine a master class with some of the game designers?
I
I
mean,
mean, what the person I've enjoyed, one of the people I've enjoyed the most is I'm blanking on his name right now. The 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 designer who designed Madame Medusa, right? Our lovely lady in the chair.
yeah,
Lily and I
I
got to
remember
meet
him.
him in Chicago. He was sort of the side events judge, and he was like, "Oh, I designed that card," and we're like, "What? This is so cool!" Because Lily was
That's
playing it in her
awesome.
Lily Fawcett deck, and then I saw him again in Seattle, and again, I think like to sit down and I think we would enjoy that kind of content, right? Like to be
Yeah.
able to sit with. It doesn't just have to be Steve. I mean, let's get
Hmm.
again. DeCandio is now on the team.
Yep.
Let's sit with the marketing team and talk about things like I think that kind of content. Again, I've never been to a D23. I imagine that is some of what we see in D23 based on kind of what I've observed. And again, let's be honest, right? Like baby steps. I mean,
Yeah.
Pokemon
Yeah.
TCG
Absolutely.
has been around for how long?
A few years longer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would even start with this. I don't know the number. I mean, how many people go to D23, right? The one that happens, I guess, like in the fall, typically.
I don't
You
know.
know,
I haven't even looked at that to be honest, but I have no doubt it is gigantic. I've seen pictures of the auditoriums and stuff, and it is
right?
just
I mean, I remember
so
the
many people.
Lorcana one. I mean, people can't even get into the panel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, anyways, again, what you don't want is you don't want to accelerate. You don't want to ramp right so fast that you create an event and you have half your space filled, right? That's
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
cost piece to that you can't, I think, recover from easily. And so, yeah, I think I continue to hold a pretty fair assessment on offering ideas and recommendations, but knowing that they take time. I mean, I'll put one out there. You don't hear me talk about this a whole lot lately, but a juniors program. I mean, look,
Mm-hmm.
they have to know that a juniors program is important. They don't need me yelling that every single day, right, out into the Twitterverse. But it's important. I'm excited. There's some things we're going to work on this year to really, I think, further help elevate and partner. Super excited again for Charlie's doing the Rising Stars thing. I think what does a Lorcana kids camp look like? Things like that. I think those are things on the horizon. But again, for me personally, it's going to be some combination of like how interested does Lily stay right in the game, and what goes in the mind of 8-year-old, right?
Yeah,
What they
yeah,
want and what they enjoy. So
yeah.
Disney Dreamlight Valley has been taking up all her time. Let's be honest. That's her new thing.
All right, all right. Well, at least it's still in the Disney area, right?
Yeah,
It's not like completely
I mean,
different, but
yeah,
no. I mean, I hope that that Ravensburger looks at these community events and the larger ones that are doing these the youth youth tournaments and everything, and they say, okay, look, there is a demand for this. They sold out this this youth tournament or whatever. Um, we can do that kind of thing. It's just we didn't know if it was going to be something that worked, right? And having that and seeing it happen consistently and, being popular and, I mean, obviously you have a slightly different kind of stage where, those community events are a little more, in that area kind of thing versus DLCs, which are intended to be, larger and everything. Um,
yeah,
but just having
yeah.
the
I'll leave with one other thought
feedback,
on this. Yeah, I'll say one other thought on this. This comes from like the tech world. There's a saying. It's called a cold start problem. I don't know. Have you heard of that before?
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's really hard to start something, right? If you're a startup, I mean, like you're Uber, right? How do you start Uber? You have to have drivers and you have to have customers who want drivers. And like those early days for that startup was really difficult, right? And they spent a lot of money, right, acquiring both drivers, incentivizing drivers and customers. Cold start problems are really interesting. And when I think about like, let's say even just like juniors, we're actually here in Dallas this week. It's where my parents are. I'm here for work. And I went to a locals on Monday and, talked to, again, it's a group of people I've never met before. It's always weird being the outsider, right? When you go to a local
Yeah.
league. But I love it. I love that feeling because you get to hear their stories, you get to hear their connection to the game. And at least two different individuals talked about their kids who got into the game and are no longer into the game.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
usually one of three answers I get. The first one is they're too young, right? They don't quite really like, they're not really reading, so they're not there yet. The second one is they have other pre-existing hobbies
Hmm.
that are already occupying their competitive time, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Is like young competitors. So it's a niche. To give up one hobby, right, or one competitive hobby for another can be very challenging. And then the third one is there aren't enough other kids to play with,
Yeah.
right? And so again, cold start problem, right? Like you got to have the kids to have the kids. And so again, at the same moment, I look at any of these DLC or sorry, any of these LGSs, and you look at like their Pokemon scene, and it's just like, wow, like where are all these kids who like cardboard? And how do we
Yeah.
get that? So I've often thought about that, right? Like, is it easier to convert someone who plays another trading card game because that kid's already committed, right? And if they're competing, both the kid and the parent who supports them see like a high enough, right, either ROI or expected value that makes it worth pursuing this as a competitive hobby over something like soccer, chess, dance, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's really I don't know the answer to that. I've thought quite a bit about how do you foster that kind of competitive community.
Hmm.
We know that they exist in pockets around the world, right? There's some incredible kids out there who play this game. There's some really, like, I think amazing, like 10 to 14-year-olds dominating in their local scenes. But by and large, right, it's not like there's 20 kids showing up to League.
Yeah.
Whereas, I've got one game store, they're like, an official Pokemon store. Again, not to keep going back to Pokemon, but again, they've really captured, I think, the youth market in a way that other card games haven't, right? And so there's something there. And it can't just be because Pokemon are really darn cute, right? That's part of it. But again, I think the pathway for Ravensburger, for Disney and Lorcana, has to be a little bit different. Again, I'm really excited for what that looks like, and again, however we contribute to it, that's part of our mission, right?
Yep. Yep. Definitely. All we as the community can do is to keep giving that feedback and trying to do it in a constructive way, which is really difficult sometimes. But yeah.
Yep.
But, well, cool. Well, hey, Daniel, thanks so much for sitting down with me and talking through the event and some of your ideas about what makes good events and everything. I do want to give you some time. We talked about this. Give you some time to give your thank yous to sponsors, to folks that helped out during your event. Anything you would like to share on that side?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, first off, again, thank you for inviting us again, inviting me again this time, to the
Yeah.
Lorcana chats. And yeah, again, a big thank you to our sponsors. I mean, again, Enchanted Moments would not have happened. First off, again, would not have happened without the Illumiteers. It would not have happened without our host sponsor, the Long Center for Performing Arts. It would not have happened without our title sponsor, Wilder Gaming. And again, I can we'll put up an image, but the I think I'm really grateful for my co-hosts and Vox Lorcana, who also sponsored, Mattified, who donated amazing foil play mats, Rebecca Quest, right, who herself also significantly contributed to the social experience, and then of course the Game Castle, one of our local other LGSs, who again has always been a supporter of Lily and I, and again we're very supportive of this event. So thank you to all of them for all their their sponsorship and their belief, right, that we could create an experience that was magical and worthy of our Illuminator community.
Nice. Nice. And I'll make sure and get all the links for everything and put it in the show notes. And so we'll have,
I appreciate it.
if people want to find out more information about these groups, they can just click right there, pretty easy. All right, well,
Great.
cool. Well, I guess last, just let people know where they can find you, and in case you decide to work out another event in the future.
Yeah, easiest is to find me on Twitter X at Lorcana Fanatics. We're also active on Instagram. Very, very light YouTube content, but you can always DM me on Discord as well, same username. And then we're also at Lorcana Fanatics.lorcana.community on Blue Sky as well.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, Daniel. And yeah, we'll see you around the community.
Appreciate it. Same, Chris. Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening in to my conversation with Daniel. It was great to hear that the event went so well, and I loved hearing his thoughts about what the future could hold. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and rate on your platform of choice. If you'd like to find out more about the show, head over to lorcanachats.com, or you can email us directly at lorcanachats@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.